Hello, everybody. Thank you for watching The Naturalist Capitalist. I'm your host, Reed Coverdale, and we've got Zach back on the show again. How's it going today, Zach?
Good. How about yourself? Thanks for having me on.
Pretty good. So you've been removed from Twitter since the last time we had you on. What exactly happened there?
They took the guillotine memes a little too seriously, I guess. Someone else reported me or flagged it, or a bunch of people probably rose Twitter for some reason defending Biden. I only ever get in trouble for those like memes under Democrats.
Yeah, I'm not really sure how I still have an account actually with how many memes or statements I've made about Congress, and I don't know. I am shocked that I'm still around, but we miss you. But you're still there in an alternate account, so we still get your takes. I don't know if you want to publicize what that account is or if you're trying to keep that secret. But
well, I'll eke it out slowly to people. I don't want to let Twitter know.
Yeah,
they don't like when you do that.
No. So what we're talking about today is I titled this video "Black Pilled." So I'm going to read the Urban Dictionary definition. It is a catastrophic prophecy or spiritless prophesying for the future that is not necessarily grounded in reality, or a red pill gone hopelessly bleak. That's how the Urban Dictionary describes the black pill. But I would say, not necessarily grounded in reality could be true, but, that doesn't mean it's not necessarily not grounded in reality at the same time. There's, I've just been, over the last couple of weeks or so, I've just been constantly reminded how dumb the population that we're expecting to vote our way out of this with actually is. I mean, they're very, very dumb.
I just want to be clear, because some people, they take it in weird directions, like the red pill and the blue pill, but a lot of people think of it now as Democrat pilled or Republican pilled, which is just, I don't use it I think that's bad. I usually go with the actual matrix, blue is stay asleep, red is the truth. And then I always thought black pill is basically the doom pill. The red pills, you see the truth. The black pill is, the truth that you see is that everything is fucked because we're just doomed. So, and yeah, when you just, there's so much of it. All the people who, for the last year, we'll push Biden left, or Trump is, the savior, QAnon righteous Jesus leader or whatever. And it's just, it's in kind of insane, the two worlds that people that are forming around these camps, and it's neither of them are based in any kind of reality at all. That's just it's an entire reality based in denial of what's happening, and just building up what you wish things were like in your own mind, and then pretending it's like that, I guess. Both sides essentially saying trust the plan while bombs continue to drop. Both sides saying our guy doesn't drop bombs while bombs continue. It's been 20 years. Bombs haven't stopped for 20 years, and most people have no idea that we're still bombing people.
I was getting into arguments with Trump supporters the last couple days because I've been criticizing Biden's attack on Syria. They get confusing because they're just all the same. Biden's attack on Syria, and they were saying, "Wow, that didn't take long. Do you miss Trump yet?" It's what are you talking about? Do you remember 2017 when he was finally becoming presidential because he was starting his airstrikes? Or do you remember just over a year ago when we airstriked a general of a sovereign country? And and they're just completely in denial that any of this.
And then a nuclear scientist, because we need it wasn't even that they were working on nukes. He's a nuclear scientist, which is just a physicist.
Right.
That's not a nuclear scientist is not a huge difference from an engineering physicist or a rocket engineer. It's just, they kind of specialize, but at the end of the day, they're physicists, and he's studying it, And America was like, oh, we need to make the world think they have nukes, so just blow up his car. And like, what blows my mind is how no one really like. It's a conversation I have all the time with people who are like, wait, Obama started a war? It's like, he started 5. And then it's almost worse when people are like, Trump didn't start any new wars. And it's like, no, he just told you he pulled troops out of Syria as he just put them on Saudi Arabian oil fields. And you're all like, he's the anti-war president. And it's like, no, he just moved things.
Right.
He's killing other people. We're calling these other rebel groups a new name, new president. That's how this works. I'm wondering what al-Nusra will be this time. Or Al-Qaeda, or who are they now? I don't know. What's their new name? ISIL? Is that still a thing?
Yeah, that's still a thing. But yeah, I mean, they do just change the names. I mean, it was Al-Qaeda, the terrorist groups that we were fighting against because of 9/11. And then after Obama became president, suddenly they became moderate rebels that we were arming. You switch the labels around.
I'm not even trying to take sides, which one's good, which one's bad. I'm pretty sure the Kurds were at one point the enemy of Turkey, who is a NATO ally, so we didn't like them. And then, of course, during Trump's time, they're the Kurds who we need to keep bombing Syria to save. And I just, I'm pretty sure they had other names too. Like they had a Y in it, like YPL or something like that first. And now they're the Kurds. Or maybe that was the Turkish Liberation Army, was the YPL one. They just keep changing the names. That's why it's so hard to keep track of. I thought it was complicated when I was growing up because there were so many groups fighting. And then I learned that they're just changing the names. It's like a shell game.
Yeah, I mean, I saw this great interview with Rand Paul. I think it was on The View. And, it was after Trump had moved the 50 soldiers away from the border or whatever. And they were talking about the Kurds. And he said, we don't even know what we're doing there. And Rand Paul's one of the guys who's like the most in-depth on foreign policy in Congress. And he said, I don't even really understand what's going on there. We've got all these different factions that we're supposed to be allied with, but we're also fighting these people, and we're allied with these people, but they're against these other people that we're supposed to protect. And it's just a mess.
I mean, at this point, our soldiers are there moderating a proxy war where we're just arming and training everyone in this, I can't really see which side we're not arming and training, and also which side Russia's not arming and training. Also which side Iran's not arming and training. Like, I have no idea what's going on. Like, this clusterfuck really is just a shell game of nonsense over an oil pipeline.
Yeah.
Going to like the Eastern Bloc, kind of Eastern Europe, like through the Qatar-Turkey pipeline.
Yeah, I mean, even just the stuff we talked about right there, though, most Americans probably don't even know what country we've been bombing over the weekend. They can't tell any of them apart. They don't know why we were in any of them in the first place or why we even say we're still there. And we're expecting these people to vote us out of the situation we're in. It's always been about, okay, let's get this candidate to the top. Let's just get enough people to vote for them. I'm starting to lose hope in that strategy because I've just realized how uneducated everybody is, how little everybody cares. And what's concerning is seeing a lot of the ignorant statements about what's going on right now, what Biden is or isn't doing, what our military is or isn't doing, and realizing that these people all have the same power of the vote that I do. But I
had a conversation on Facebook with someone who was literally saying, like, look, what should we do against the people who attacked us? These Iran-backed militias. What should we do about it? Not attack them? And I was like, we should leave. And he goes, no. The conversation about being there is a broader topic. What should we do about this particular attack? And I was like, no, leave. That's what we should do about this attack.
Right.
And he's like, what? No, we're being attacked. And I was like, we're being attacked. Like, do you not remember what happened a couple months ago when we said we would leave? They all met at Camp David with the fucking Taliban. Like that was a thing that happened, or was it gonna happen? But we agreed to leave, and like we're just overstaying again. So they sent some rockets like, hey, fuck off. And now we're going to use that to justify a whole nother fucking war. And it's insane, obviously. And people just don't like the news, like the same media story has been playing since I was like 11 years old. War on terror, Assad, or, insert any leader you want deposed. They're all the worst people ever. It's just pictures of weird green camo in a desert or a poppy field. Just like surprisingly like I actually can't believe how much footage they've released of soldiers in poppy fields. Like it isn't the biggest tell in the world. Like that's where the heroin comes from. Like there are all our American soldiers in the poppy fields. Heroin epidemic. Has anyone ever put two and two together? Ever? Are they gonna even try? Like, and even if they did, like what like people like here kind of just feel defeated about it and also very much don't care.
Right.
Like it's removed from their lives. Like they don't care.
And they have the same power to vote to elect legislators that anybody else does. So you were actually, I did want to talk about this idea just because I find it interesting and it's something I've talked about before, not on my show, but just in life. I have talked about the idea before. The idea that to vote and to have an impact on other people's lives and to have an impact on the world stage and policies that literally can kill people, should there be some sort of test you have to take to prove that you know what's going on, that you know what issues you're voting on, that you know what the person you're voting for stands for? And by the way, this is all hypothetical. I don't think either of us are suggesting policy. We're just talking in the hypothetical here about the idea that some idiot who knows absolutely nothing about foreign policy or domestic policy or anything has the right to come vote to put someone in charge of your life and your money and where it goes. And what a strange idea that is, that they can do that without knowing anything about what they're voting on.
A big one for me, like in this, like people I've talked to over the last year or so, is just, I'll say how actually terrible like a taxpayer funded subsidy is, especially for something like oil companies, right? And I'll say, hey, you all can go buy all the green, electric vehicles you want. You can use all the solar energy you want. They're taking your taxes for oil because we've committed it to them, and that's law, and it will be taken until we undo that law. And they'll go, what? No, that's a thing. And I'll be like, yeah, it's called a subsidy. And when it's on the ballot, it's written like they're going to build roads for us. That's why we give them this money. Like we're laundering it through oil companies. But people don't know what the words taxpayer oil funded subsidy is. They don't know what that means. They don't know what's going to happen because of it. And they don't know what it, like, they're all fighting for the, the Green New Deal or whatever, because we all want solar farms. And it's like, cool. You will pay for those solar farms with taxes. And then while you're doing that, you will continue to fund oil companies. And then after those solar farms are built, your taxes are going to continue to be taken for oil companies because you haven't addressed that issue yet. And that's just going to keep being an issue because none of you know what that means, and you just keep voting for it. And that's a kind of a fucking problem. And let me be clear, when I even talk about the voting test, to even like entertain that idea, in my mind, there has to be like, the test would have to be free. Like the education on it would have to be easily accessible by everyone and neutral across the board. Pearson can't have control of the fucking textbooks where they just make it different for different states. It has to be the same information. But when we're voting on a taxpayer-funded oil subsidy, whether or not to continue it or to remove it, people have to know what they're voting for, and that they don't right now at all. Basically, the rich weaponize idiots against themselves and everyone else.
Yeah.
And turns out it's really easy to do. Like it's really easy. I don't know. It just keeps happening. And a test, it's not the best idea, but something kind of needs to happen because people keep voting for bombs who have no idea that's what they're voting for, because it's written like they're funding Boeing's new jet program for safer flights, but it's actually flight tests on the F-35 program. They don't know what the fuck any of those things are.
Yeah, I mean, the problem with a test, obviously, is who writes the test, what questions are on the test, how can you audit the test to make it fair, who's deciding whether it's fair. So, I mean, it's kind of a...
Someone asked me that, and my best answer that I had was someone like Webster's. Just like someone who, like, your test is what is a taxpayer funded subsidy, and break it. What is a subsidy? Where are your taxes going? What happens here? Right? Just prove that you know what this is. And I'd even entertain the idea of like sections, right? Like, oh, you know medicine, you've worked with medical law, medical technology, you should be voting in that area. But like I know biochemistry. I've worked with plants and biological sciences, and I know a lot of other things as well. But there are a lot of areas that I'm uneducated in, and I'm the kind of person who would go and educate myself on something before I voted on it.
Right.
But in a test-like system, I would either pass this test or I wouldn't, right? And it either covers enough or it doesn't. And there's no reason why it couldn't fragment that. Like you are good at law and writing laws, and you should have an input on this. And people who it's not that you need a law degree, but you need to go and also know, like, you have to be able to discuss this stuff, how it's happening, right? And on sort of every level, but also obviously the details of this. And we're not, again, reiterate, we're not proposing legislation here, right? Just spitballing on the kind of morals of the idea itself,
right?
I guess. But I mean, at the end of the day, billions of people's lives could be at risk because of various collapsing factors of our society and the rest of the world. And that's continued and enabled by the way these people not just vote, but then think after they vote. Oh, I voted this way, these things will happen. Then they never happen, and they're always confused or always dumbfounded about what's going on in society. And there's a reason for that. It's not necessarily their fault, but we have to address what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, so I had to go through a lot of training and pass a pretty rigorous test to drive a tractor trailer. And the reason for that is because of the potential damage I could do if I were not well enough trained or if I didn't know what I was doing, right? Like, that's the whole reason you have a test, you have licenses, aside from
with a surgeon.
Aside from funding the government, I think sometimes the tests are pretty arbitrary, but the general idea behind that is to make sure that you know what you're doing so that you don't hurt people. But when it comes to voting, we're talking about the largest military in the world with, the most weapons and the most cavalier foreign policy, and we're putting idiots who know nothing about it in charge of deciding who is going to be in Congress and who's going to be the president, and who is going to have control over these things. And as you pointed out, sometimes they think a certain conclusion is going to necessitate out of their vote, but it doesn't happen. So, it's just an interesting thought to have about what should be required in order for someone to have the power to choose who is going to be in charge of the largest military in the world. Because if you do vote for someone, in my mind, you're consenting. I didn't vote for Trump.
It's a big part of it for me too.
Yeah, I didn't vote for Trump or Biden because I couldn't, Trump was too terrible to oppose Biden for me. Like, he might have been a tiny bit better or something, but I couldn't vote for him because that's giving my consent. It's basically approving of what Trump is. Like, and I can't do that. But when other people do that, in my mind, you are approving to an extent of whoever you're voting for.
There's like another layer of it for me too, when it's like the media will lie, right? They'll just say, oh, Biden's going to do this. And then activists or even just people in fucking political Twitter will be like, no, here's a video of Biden saying at a rally, he's not going to do that. Right.
Right.
And then people are like, oh, no, MSNBC wouldn't lie to me, but you could doctor a video. How do I know? Right. And then it's just, none of it matters. And, none of it's ever researched or looked into. And at the end of the day, they vote for it and they're like, oh, what bombing? I don't actually approve of that. Like, he's trying though. And it's like, what the fuck? He's been talking about being like ultra militaristic for like his entire 50-year-long career, or however long it's been. He's kind of a horrible person and super like into war. He loves it, and he loves taking stuff from other countries, especially oil, like the rest of them. And it's just, he'll say it out loud, but then his sphere around him lies, and there's no system where people have to sort of like be in charge of checking that they know what's going on before they're allowed to input. Like even a doctor, you get your medical license, but not everyone's a doctor. They don't know this. A doctor has to go do something called like CMEs, like continued medical educations, where it's like you have to keep taking classes. Like as a doctor, you are just forever in school also, as well as being a doctor, because there are always updates in medical procedures, research. You have to go to a certain number of conferences every year, and you have to take a certain number of classes and all this stuff to keep your license in certain medical fields. And you can't let it lapse in any area, right? It's like, oh, you used to have a cardiology license, but you've been doing physical therapy and you haven't taken any continuing classes. Like you have no idea what's going on with the heart in modern science. And it's been like 4 years or some shit, right? So there has to be, and even if that, like, it doesn't have to be that intense, like being a doctor, but there's some kind of system where it's like my continued participation in saying what happens in society is also reliant on proving that I'm engaged with it and understand what I'm, talking about and voting on. And if I'm going to put a vote down that makes it, go towards happening, make it real, that I was someone who, like, even if it's like I disagree, even if you're someone who likes war, right? Go educate yourself about what's happening, really, prove that you do, and then go vote for the war. And, that's something we'll have to deal with later. But at the same time, I would rather deal with someone who's educated and is in favor of war than deal with people who have no idea war is happening.
Right.
Because that's a much harder like battle to fight. At the end of the day, I can talk to, like, if the people I'm talking to know what's happening, I can try to be like, no, if we approach, Assad from this way or Russia from this way, maybe we can work it out. We can reach real solutions in a democratic way. But that's not even like a thing that could happen with our system right now, because there's no check on the amount of participation you get based off of how much or are participating.
Yeah,
that's where votes get manipulated. That's where propaganda happens. That's where idiots vote for wars they don't know are going on for 20 years.
Yeah, so I mean, you come more from the left, so I tend to get the idea that liberals piss you off more than conservatives. With me, it's actually,
I speak about liberals more because, especially on Facebook, and on Twitter, but all my friends from my life are kind of on my Facebook. If I talk about like Republicans, they'll just agree with me. They already don't like Republicans. They know that. There's nothing I'm teaching them by memeing on Republicans. So I meme on liberals because they need to learn that they're also doing the shitty things. But no, I like, people do get the idea that I'm like kind of Republican because of how much I shit on liberals. No, they're exactly as bad. There's only one party in my mind, the Democratic Republic Party, and they really love war. They love it.
Yeah, I like Demonican because it has the, sounds like demon a little bit. It's better than Republicrat. But yeah, I come from the right initially, so I'm the same way. Most of my friends are Republicans, so I do shit on the Democrats too. But when I do it, they all jump in like, yeah. And then when I go after the Republicans, they're like, what, are you a Democrat now? I mean, it's just the most ridiculous binary thinking ever. But I actually get more angry when I see Republicans acting like, Donald Trump didn't just rack up on like almost $8 trillion in debt while he was president. I mean, it's completely
skyrocketed. It's like I see Republicans like, this money printing has to stop, and I'm like that's all under Trump, right? You know that? Like, you're talking every day about how you're going to get him back as the president to fix the debt. That little fucking, like, the most money printing ever happened with him.
Right.
And guess what? If you're concerned about that, that's slowed down under Biden. He's not giving out money. Like, we haven't concerned about us. Like, he doesn't care.
He doesn't
care what people think of him.
We haven't passed a giant stimulus bill under Biden yet. I mean, it just passed the House. It's probably not going to pass the Senate. But it's just hilarious seeing all these Republicans freak out about, all the debt, all the deficit, all the money, and I'm seeing that it's hilarious. Not so much on Twitter. On Twitter, I'm probably mostly followed by libertarians, but on Facebook, I'm mostly Republican friends, and the stuff they're posting, it almost sounds anarchist and libertarian, and I'm just like, where have you guys been the last 4 years?
I've run into a bunch of this, and then you talk to them for a second, and you realize they're like, I want to destroy the system and make sure that the Republicans are the system forever. And I'm like, no, this is worse.
Right.
Somehow, this is somehow worse. And it's not that the Republicans are worse than the Democrats. It's just that your actual thinking is the Democrats are so bad, we should make it a fascist Republican state because that will fix things. And it's like, oh God, no.
Yeah.
And it's like both of them are the problem. Like both, well, like it's really that they're bought by these corporations, and like real other things that are just like happening, and most people aren't even talking about it. And it's like Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos are buying up incredible amounts of farmland, just ridiculous amounts. They've like owned tons of patents and are recently throwing more into trying to get approved. In like GMO seeds and AI farming tech. And like what, I don't know, I'm not going to go into any of it, like what they're planning with that. I don't like that. But it's true that they're buying up insane amounts of farmland, like millions of acres across 18 states, both of them. It's like they're in a race to snatch up anything that's for sale. And that shit's for sale because, I mean, prices are going up. It's a commodity. Like people are leaving the cities because it's a disaster there right now, and a lot of the biggest ones. And that's lucrative, but also they're gaming the system from almost every single side, and there's just no one's even educated that that's happening, right? Like I shared a meme the other day that there was like one of the worst human rights violations that's going on right now is actually in California at like the world's largest women's prison, where there's just acres and acres of farmland surrounding it. And for the longest time, people didn't even really know that there was a prison there because all that farmland is owned by people who are totally down on the prison system and also are probably invested in it. And it's just, that's how this works. Then most people were like, oh, human rights violations. No, we're America. That doesn't happen. And they'll never go to the farmlands, let alone own any of it, let alone see the worst, biggest prison, biggest women's prison in the entire world and how crazy its human rights violations are. AOC isn't running off there and taking sad pictures at the fence.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it seems like, to me, I mean, on Twitter, it's hard to tell how much of a difference you make because Twitter's Twitter. But, with my friends and my family, I've made very, very little progress in changing people's minds, even when you have the information right in front of them and you say, look, this person is doing this person's doing this is what we should do. It doesn't matter. I mean, they just out with hate.
Yeah. And what's crazy to me is when they're like, you give them all the information and then they recognize it and agree with you, and then we'll vote the same way. Like, oh, but I want my vote to count for something. And it's like, oh my God, you still I really don't get this at a real level. You're not getting it. And this is across the board. We're not some super elite people, but like most people don't even engage with this. And the people who sort of do are like doing it for team sports. And then there's like the tiny fraction of people who are like interested in figuring out what some of this legalese bullshit is actually trying to say. And it's what it's saying is it's all a disaster. Just blackpilled. Just like that's not going to get fixed anytime soon without like full-scale violent revolution or everyone. And this is the real thing about the test for me. And this, again, it would have to be free. Education would have to be like across the board, even and unbiased. And, I don't know how you check that. I don't know the details of it, but like people have to be incentivized. They're just entitled to this vote. And they're like, oh yeah, whatever. I want my team to win with my vote, right? That's what voting is. And it's like, no, you're voting on which contracts to, give your taxes to and which countries to bomb or not bomb. Or whose oil to steal or all this stuff. And they're just like, nah, rah rah healthcare or rah rah pro life or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Whatever issues your thing, like you pick your team and then you're like, I care about this. They said I saw a commercial or something, or my senator's a Republican and he said he's having lunch with the president tomorrow. And it's like, oh my God, that's that just can't be how things work. And maybe if people were like, I don't get a say in the bombs or the taxing or the any of it unless I go and learn the test, and then you take it and you're violently frustrated, like, oh God, this sucks. And then you like have to figure out, hopefully, like what the fuck a taxpayer funded subsidy is. And maybe you read those words on a fucking ballot and you're like, oh no, I know what that means, and you don't vote for it. Like maybe, because people care about voting. People want to vote. And I don't know how to make them care about what their vote does. So I don't know, maybe make them work to get their vote. Like Starship Troopers, like a dumb cult movie, but it's funny. I recommend it.
Mm-hmm.
Their whole like system in their sci-fi world is that to get your vote, like no one's born with a vote, but you are born with like school and food and healthcare. But you're like, to get your vote and to figure, like, if you want to say in what happens in society, you have to go into the military. You have to serve, right? And God, I mean, America probably would take it that direction so fucking fast, and we would need to stop that. That's not okay.
Yeah,
not okay with that. That's not a good, right? That'll continue violent warfare forever,
right.
Like until infinity, until like we get ourselves killed by a more violent society.
Right.
But educating, ourselves, that could be a good in. Especially if the education is somehow approved, like to be like as a count. I don't know how to do it. Make it unbiased. Make the test just definitions. Make it. I don't know. And I also say that there's a double side to this coin, which is the making sure that the lawyers on the other end can't write bills that are still confusing. Like things have to be presented on a ballot in a way that's also the way we're teaching people what the words mean.
Mm-hmm.
So a way to actually cut through the propaganda and a way for, all you have to do is take a test as hard as your driver's test every year, and then you get to go vote on the ballot because you'll know what the fucking measures are saying. That's probably a thing that should happen because people vote on all the measures anyway. They just don't read it though. They'll go on a Democrat's website and the Democrat says, here's the list, vote this list. And they go, yeah, I don't have time to even read this list. Just these numbers, ballot, bubble it in. There we go. I know how to do a standardized test. Like, it's not a good system what we have right now, and it needs to change. And people's attitudes about what they're causing in the world needs to change. Because, and I've made this point, which is like, this wouldn't matter so much if we were Sweden, or
right.
a smaller country. But we have the world's most violent military, the biggest military, and the most everywhere military. And it's causing like what we vote for ripples out across the world. And that matters. And we need to take that responsibility not lightly. And it may be like a privilege of being in like the richest, most militaristic, like the most everywhere society, the one with the world reserve currency, is that you don't get to vote on what's happening with the tax dollars unless you understand what's happening with the currency. Our lives are great in America because our government can just print dollars because that's the thing that they're in charge of, right? And they need to balance that with the rest of the world's trade. And I'm not saying that's a good system. I want to end the Fed immediately. But, like maybe because we have like it's a responsibility we currently are sitting on top of. And maybe your vote shouldn't decide how the rest of the world's economies are affected every single 2 years so that other countries just like kind of take violent action against other interests of ours so that their lives are more stable. Maybe we say like, hey, your lives are great in America. And so to vote on economic policy that affects everyone in the world, you need to be more educated as an American.
Yeah. I mean,
it's an American to be here,
What's interesting is that I'm expecting backlash in the comments from, that we'd even that we'd even think of this of restricting the right to vote. But I mean, I think people don't understand how much repercussion there is to your power to vote, and that you voted these people in.
Again, very in favor of breaking up power in our government. The president has way too much power.
Yes.
There should be we should be voting on a war council. Maybe there's blocks of states that have that they're voting on one person that's like their every 4 years election is they're representing their war council,
Right.
like from this block of states or whatever it is. Or maybe even that's a whole other separate Senate. There's 50 representatives that we represent Colorado's vote on whether or not we want to go to war, spend our taxes on war. And then that is just, we can't tie that in with other things because that's how these omnibus bills get passed. Where they're like, don't you want your $600? And then they pass tons for corporations and tax breaks and money that print for American Airlines for some fucking reason, or like you will get all these billions of dollars, but you have to not fire employees for 2 months, but only 2 months.
Right.
Because there's just too much, too much in these bills. These senators and the congressmen can't read the bills in the time that they pass it. And the way I think to fix that is to not let Nancy Pelosi have so much fucking say on what's in a bill. It's like Nancy Pelosi is only on her, economics council. So, she only gets a say on California's input on the federal budget. That's the most power she has in a day. And that they don't meet with the other parts. And it's just the people of America who are supposed to understand and work with the moving pieces, because everything in America affects everyone else. Our medical policies, what we invest our taxes in, what happens with our what companies we're popping up with these subsidies, the defense contractors, the oil companies. And I'm not even saying I'm gung ho on a Green New Deal, but if there weren't these oil subsidies, like Elon Musk could be putting up fucking whatever his Musk roofs over everyone's houses.
Yeah.
I don't know what they're called. I forget.
Yeah.
Or driving towns to be more into Bitcoin with offering them Starlink. It's like you get free Starlink on a phone that has the Elon wallet or whatever. But there's the anti-competition incentives in place by the government to protect industries that we are investing in with our taxes. And that's why there's laws protecting certain companies, not just sectors of we don't have taxes that go towards healthcare. We have taxes that go to specific healthcare insurance companies because we're invested in protecting people through insurance companies. And even if we develop a Medicare for all, it will always be too expensive because no one's addressing the tax subsidies that we're going to Cobra or whatever the fuck one in California. That's just awful. And it's price gouging and all of the worst practices of the crony capitalist society we're in is enabled by people voting because they don't know what the fucking words mean.
Yeah. I mean, I think more than just, even if you were to somehow establish a fair test that would make sure people knew what they were voting for, I think just the fact that people are able to vote for such sweeping changes and such sweeping regulations, such sweeping decisions is just inherently wrong. I mean, it needs to be
in a paragraph could mean the difference of, one company is getting propped up for the next 25 years on tax money.
Right.
That's just, we're going to fund this sector of society, and that sector of society is run by this one constructing company. They're going to build the infrastructure. And it's like, we're not a part of those, the contracts or the deals and all of that, but that gets swept into a single paragraph, subsection 1025-B64.
Yeah.
That isn't even up on the congressional website because no one maintains that shit.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's the biggest problem is just reduce. I mean, the no party, the idea we came up with, almost a year ago now, that's becoming more. That's becoming
the big ones. Sunset them all.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's becoming more and more applicable. The idea that every single federal law that is passed, I forget what we said, a 10-year sunset, every single.
Or you have different sectors, things here's the ones we're going to say last this long, whatever it is. But every single law, no matter what in the government, is going to eventually sunset. And if you want it to keep going, you have to keep re-voting for it. Because there is just an infinite number of never-ending and complicated web of these laws because none of them from the past get erased. So all of this convoluted and conflicting legislation exists. And a judge can just be like, no, I like how that judge in 1957 in Ohio ruled. And it's like there's just no legal, like there's nothing happening here that's real or is standardized. And then also we're bombing the rest of the world to conform somehow to this madness.
Yeah.
It's like it's just that can't keep happening. Like we will eventually collapse in on ourselves like a dying star, like fucking Rome. It'll be epic, and we'll go into a Great Depression that lasts thousands of. It will be a generation of people in America that are like really fucked over for a lot of different reasons and a lot of different areas cited. Like our medicine will be worse, our infrastructure will be worse, our electrical grid will be worse, our ability to heat our houses will be worse, our plumbing will be worse, our water quality will be worse. Like that's where we're headed. And it's because people are taking advantage of the government in these giant bills, and no one in the government's reading it except for Pelosi and McConnell, and their lawyers. Really, they don't fucking do anything. Actually, they're like 85 and ancient. They belong in their tombs already. Like, why are they still alive or in government? Like, I'm firmly like, I know this is a hot take. Age limits. You are like, we as humans do not live long enough. We deteriorate. Oxygen oxidizes us. We rust. That's why we age. We are actively rusting. So there's just a certain point where your brain is rusted. You are no longer effective. Leave. You are no longer like just 70. That's too old. You are too old. Go be a grandparent or a chess player. I don't care. Whatever. Do your life. But get the fuck out of bombing countries and making decisions on the entire world's economy. You are rusted and bad. You are broke and you are old.
No, I think that's a great idea. I had it was actually my proudest vote I made this year was for John Molnar for Utah's 4th district for U.S. Congress, and it was his idea. He had a few great ideas. One was that congressional representatives should only get paid the average income of their constituents. So your decisions are going to influence.
I mean, like, it'd be funny as hell as what's happening right now. Like, take what's happening in Tampa, right? Mm-hmm. Miami didn't get super restricted, or not much Miami. Florida didn't get super restricted from COVID regulations and shutdowns. And Tampa took advantage. They like imported French sand for their beaches and are just like blowing up with like the Bitcoin scene. And they're just like, they're going to be like a new Silicon Valley in 10 years, but for like Bitcoin people. And they're just taking advantage of it. And they're like, their net worth would go up as a politician. Like the just like the quality of life for their people going up, right? And they're creating opportunities for people. They want more businesses to be a crypto available so that it can be a part of people's lives. So it's attracting people there. And like I think it would have to obviously be different percentage and rates, and I don't know how you do the calculations, but yeah, if you're creating opportunities and life is better for your people, then why shouldn't you get paid more? And if you're just like sapping the system and life is going bad, like why shouldn't the like mayor of Flint be paid nothing or just owe money at this point?
Yeah. And then his other idea was he said the same thing, age limits, like it's ridiculous. he was also for term limits, but mostly age limits. He said, I think he was saying 62, which I agree with.
I mean, yeah, honestly, like 50, probably fine. Like, you are rusting. I'm rusting. Everyone is rusting. The young have the better ideas, always. That's historically true. Like, they come up with and they're kind of driving where things are heading. And like, there's a class of society who's had wealth and kept it for so long, and then they're just keeping it stagnant. And then there's no upward momentum, and it's kind of creating that wealth gap. But then like it's kind of also what I think is driving the blockchains, bubble and this coin rush, right?
Right.
Is there's upward mobility there. People who get in early, people who get in now, they'll be richer because now the institutions and the rich people are starting to see value in it and starting to accept it in stores and hold on to it in banks. And that's important. And so, it's kind of, another gold rush at the end of the day. There's always going to be rich gold people, but it is it'll be always open. It's more, or at least right now it is. And people can get in on it. So there's mobility. So people are getting in on it. And it's because old people are stagnant and it's bad. That's, Bruce Lee said it. running water never goes stale, so you just got to keep on flowing.
Yeah.
That has to be the way it goes, and that's like sort of what biology says, the evolution says, like survival of the fittest is about who can adapt to change the best. It's not about being strong. It's about adapting to changes in your environment. It was the whole theory for Darwin's evolution, and that matters. And like look at our crumbling infrastructure. That's like a huge tell that we're not gonna like go good places as a society, even short term. We're like that's a really big problem, our crumbling infrastructure, because we can't move like things. And I'm not saying that like we need government to go fix the roads, but we do need roads to drive on, and they're not being fixed in any way, right? Nothing new is being created, and it's just all the old stuff starting to crumble, and that's not like eventually it'll break, and we will have to fix it and spend money and time and effort fixing it instead of just advancing.
Right.
And that's really terrible when we pretty much run a lot of things for the rest of the world. If we start crumbling, they will too. And your votes let us keep crumbling. Like things are going to keep getting worse. That's why things are getting worse.
Yeah. Let's go to some of the comments here. Noah says, happy you guys are still around. I just looked into the Waco Massacre. I'm pissed. Did you see the ATF, what they tweeted out today? Like honoring.
No.
Oh my God. They
there's nothing the ATF says that's going to make me like, oh, respect ATF.
They tweeted out they tweeted out the names of the officers who died in Waco and honoring their deaths.
Like, not the children, not like the children
that were burned alive. But I was like, wow, that's low even for the ATF. Like that's super low. I was shocked.
yeah, that's not great. Fucking.
The ratio is beautiful though. I think last I looked, I had like 95 likes and like 3,000 quote tweets or something. So at least so that was a little bit of a white pill. You know, it's like, okay, hey, some people know what's going on. Let's see. I think
though. How many people are really in each county? How much of them are going to shift the vote in their county?
Not enough.
Black pill.
Yeah. It always goes back to the black pill. Let's see. Service guarantees citizenship. You will always have an out of control state abusing everyone. Why is the answer to destroy the state? Why is the answer to destroy the state and reform or get it under control? By that, I mean the people. I think he meant why isn't the answer to destroy the state? I mean, that's kind of where I don't know. That's where I'm coming to. Like
what I always say is I'm actually an anarchist, and I'm in favor of just burn it all down. We'll see what we make out of it when we want to be, more harmonious. But given that that's probably like either we're headed towards Rome and it's going to collapse, and that's the case, or this terrible society is going to continue. How can we make this terrible society better if it continues? Is my thought. Because at the end of the day, I always want things to get better, even though I'm pretty sure we're Rome. It's why I invested in Bitcoin and gold, and I'll try and make things better, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess the point of despair I've arrived at is just realizing that this is just human nature with government. Like it seems like we always end up here. It seems like many societies start out as a society that
you want a real white pill? One of the best ones I've had recently.
What's that?
Is the blockchains. This whole new aspect of what the blockchains are doing called governance, which is like a lot of people don't know that not all of these coins are supposed to be currencies. A lot of them represent basically like your investment into different technologies and different companies. And like sometimes what that company offers you is, let's say it's some kind of YouTube-ish or Netflix like service, right? It's not actually a currency. Buying into YouTube points or tokens lets you interact with YouTube and its services differently, right? And creating for it would get you the token that lets you use it, and that's just what a lot of these tokens do. And a lot of times these companies, they form them like in the protocols for what's going on, and then they get the initial investments and they get it rolling, and then they they call them like burns, token burns, or there's a lot of different ways to do this. But then the creators of the company just give it up. So, all right, it's free and it's open source and it's to the blockchain and its people. And hopefully it gets adopted. And then anything that happens with that company, anyone can just, it's almost like a direct democracy. Anyone can write up a paper and say, I think we, as the Polkadot coin group, should invest in this group of coins because, this group of services is the future, right? And then I say, like, I wrote this paper and put it up. Other people can like get these like delegation tokens, and then they give it to me. But it's basically like they're giving me the vote. And then the more votes that white paper gets, it gets put up to like on a higher rank. Picture Reddit, right? It's getting up ranked, and then people start to see them. And then once they get enough approval, which is just a total out of the total user base, total number of people holding tokens, how many people have voted to approve this thing happening, then it just goes to open funding. And then it's only open, like it's like a first round investor, right? It's only open to the people who were staked in it or the people who are in the Polkadot coin group, whatever it is, right? I'm not trying to shill an actual coin, right? It's like, I don't care about that. But the point is, it's kind of working like a democracy where these systems, these services, what happens with them, who gets to interact with them and who controls it is just entirely based off of participation, knowledge, and engagement, and your ability to move mountains within a system that is just full of individual people and their representation of my vote, of my share of this company, right? And it's true, if I'm like a person who holds a ton of share of a built like a company, I have a lot of shares, and this again means tokens. I put a lot of those tokens in the protocols that I want to pass, and then they're more likely to pass. But I'm a bigger vote shareholder of this company, so I have a bigger vote of what's going on. It's like it's just giving the power to the people who hold the tokens, and then if you're not, you can still use the services. You can still sign up for the Netflix-like services, right? You're paying them, whatever it is. But then the coins and the money and how that money is distributed and what it goes to and who gets dividends or how that works is just run by the people who are involved in it. And this is Bitcoin, and this is kind of just technology that's being played with. But the idea that this exists and it's running well, and people have their little hash wallets or whatever it is. You have your identity. It's encrypted. You have your participation and what it's happening there. And it's a kind of white pill in that if this technology really advances, we could implement it in really cool ways for governance in terms of what happens in society. There's no reason to think that we couldn't. It operates really well, and it operates way better at representing your values in terms of your share of this system. And we can say that you get an equal share as the system as American, right? Maybe your UBI is issued in US dollar coins or whatever that is, right? And maybe that just works to represent your vote. It's not money, right? But then that's how you issue your vote, or maybe you earn the coin to vote, or in different areas by taking a different, issue test, or just reading these papers, or you get, you mine the coin by taking the test. Like that's how the coins exist on a blockchain, like the cloud. They get mined when you take the test. They're not given out by a government. The test is voted on by everyone. They're limited to the section of services that the that governance is talking about, the water services, whatever it is, limited to people, places, and locations. And it might be a better way to do things. I mean, at least is for companies. They become more profitable. They're doing good things. We'll see where that goes. It's cool, at least. It's a better way to do things, I think, than what we have now.
Yeah, decentralization, basically. Because
all of that's about.
Yeah, decentralized currency versus what we have now, which is the most centralized currency that we've ever had. I mean, it's just completely controlled from the top down. But yeah, we'll close it out there. But yeah,
invest in your coins. I'm not going to shill which one. Do your research. I'm not a financial advisor, but I think it's smart. I think it's where the society is heading, and I think it could change a lot of aspects how we do things for the better, like really better.
Yeah, check it out, guys. I agree with him. Ditch the dollar. The dollar is not the future. The dollar is going down. Whether it's Bitcoin or any of those others or gold, just get into something else, decentralize the system, and it's actually going to be better for us after the crash if we start doing that now versus
protect yourself from the crash. Things are going to crash, and it'll hurt. It's going to hurt for a lot of people. So, make sure you're good. Black pill. Things are doomed a little bit, but we'll see where it comes from. Hopefully the good people are building what comes next.
Absolutely. All right, Zach, we'll have you on again. Thanks for coming on.